My name is Alina Vance. I'm 62 years old and I live in Springfield, Illinois. Life here is usually pretty quiet, the kind of quiet where you know your neighbors and the biggest excitement is the state fair or maybe a local politician visiting. I had a good life, a comfortable life. My husband, Robert, and I had been married for 40 years. We built our life together, brick by brick, memory by memory. He was a good man, steady and kind, with a laugh that could always make me smile, even on my worst days. Just a couple of months before everything fell apart, Robert decided it was time for a treat. My old car was reliable, but it was getting tired, showing its age just like we were starting to. He surprised me with a brand new one, shiny and blue, the kind of car I never thought I'd own. He financed it through the credit union connected to where he worked. It was a simple process for him, being a member for decades. My name wasn't put on the loan paperwork, mostly because I wasn't a member of that specific credit union, and it didn't seem like a big deal at the time. Why would it? It was our car, bought with our money for me. Robert made the first payment easily. 2 months later, just 2 days before he passed away unexpectedly, he wrote the check for the second payment. He was a man of routine, meticulous about bills, but somehow, perhaps just a simple, tiny mistake, he wrote the check for $5 less than the exact amount due. $5. It seems impossible now that five little dollars could be the spark that ignited such a firestorm in my life, especially during the darkest days imaginable. But they were. Robert was gone. One day he was here, talking about what we'd do next summer, and the next day he wasn't. The silence in the house was deafening, a physical weight pressing down on me. My world had shrunk to the four walls of our home and the crushing emptiness inside me. The grief was so raw, so absolute, it felt like a physical injury. I moved through the motions of those first days like a ghost, arranging things, notifying people, trying to comprehend a future without him. It was in the middle of this haze of sorrow, the day after Robert died, that the phone rang. It was someone from the credit union. They were calling about the $5. I answered, my voice thick with unshed tears, trying to explain that Robert had just passed away the day before. I told them I knew about the small shortfall and that I would make sure the $5 and the rest of the payment got to them right away. I remember thinking, even in my grief, how strange it was that they were calling so quickly about such a small amount, but I just wanted to make it right, to handle things the way Robert would have. I hung up the phone, promising myself I'd take care of it as soon as I could gather my thoughts, which felt like an impossible task at that moment. The funeral arrangements were paramount, the shock was overwhelming, and the world outside felt distant and unreal. The car, the payment, it all seemed so trivial compared to the gaping hole Robert's absence had left. I wanted to bury my head under the covers and never come out, but there were things that had to be done, arrangements to be made, calls to answer. And then the very next day they called again. It was the credit union, but this time the tone was different, colder, harsher. They weren't asking for the $5 anymore. They were demanding the car back, just like that. They said since my name wasn't on the loan and Robert, the loan holder, was deceased, the terms of the agreement were no longer valid. They wanted the car returned immediately. I was stunned. My mind couldn't process the words. My husband of 40 years had just died. His funeral wasn't even scheduled yet, and these people were calling, not with condolences, not with sympathy, but with demands about a car payment shortfall and wanting their vehicle back. I tried to explain the situation again, the raw wound of my husband's death laid bare for a stranger on the phone. I told them about the new car, how Robert had bought it for me, how I had traded in my old, reliable car when we got this one. I had no other transportation. My lifeline to the outside world, to the grocery store, to the doctor's office, to anywhere at all, was this new car. I asked them if I could just take over the loan, put it in my name. I had the money, I had good credit, I could make the payments. It seemed like the most logical solution, the simplest way to resolve the issue. Their answer was a flat, unwavering no. They said I wasn't a member of the credit union and only members could hold loans there. I asked if I could become a member. Surely that would fix it. I had assets, I was a resident of the community, I could open an account. Again, the answer was a wall of bureaucratic refusal. They said membership was restricted to employees of certain companies, the company Robert had worked for. Since I didn't work there, I couldn't join. It was a catch-22, a cruel joke played out at the worst possible time. I pleaded with them, explained my situation again, the fresh grief, the lack of transportation, the fact that Robert had paid a significant down payment on the car. What about that money? Would they refund it? Another cold, hard no. The down payment was part of the loan agreement, tied to Robert. With him gone, so was the down payment as far as they were concerned. It was all gone. The car, the down payment, the peace of mind I desperately needed to grieve. They were being utterly relentless, completely without compassion. The calls continued, day after day, sometimes multiple times a day, for a whole week. Each call was a fresh stab wound on top of the gaping one Robert's death had left. They were hounding a grieving widow for a car that was already largely paid for, a car that represented a last gift from her husband, a car that she now depended on entirely. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep properly. The constant ringing of the phone and the dread it brought was unbearable. They didn't care about my loss, they didn't care about my situation, they only cared about their rules and getting their asset back as quickly as possible, regardless of the human cost. I felt cornered, vulnerable, and utterly alone. My child, bless their heart, tried to help, talking to me on the phone, offering support, but they lived hours away, and there was only so much they could do from a distance. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of grief and bureaucratic heartlessness. They were being such relentless, cold hearted individuals, and here I was, my husband not even buried yet, having to worry about losing my only means of getting around. Every time the phone rang, my heart would pound. It was always them, demanding, threatening, reminding me that they could just come and take the car if I didn't comply. The stress was immense. I felt like a criminal, even though I had done nothing wrong. I had offered to pay, offered to take over the loan, offered solutions, and all they did was refuse and demand. It was like talking to a brick wall that called you every single day to make you feel worse. They refused to acknowledge the reality of my situation, the fact that Robert had just died. They treated it like a simple business transaction, a defaulted loan, even though it was triggered by death, not default. It was an administrative issue to them, not a human tragedy. I would hang up the phone, shaking with frustration and sorrow. How could people be so cruel, so devoid of empathy? They knew I was a widow, grieving, alone, and they still pressed their demands relentlessly. It felt like they were preying on my vulnerability, assuming I would just give in. They were banking on my grief making me weak, making me compliant. But something inside me started to shift. The despair was still there, a heavy cloak I wore constantly, but a flicker of something else began to stir beneath it. Anger. A deep, simmering rage at their callousness, their cruelty, their absolute refusal to see me as a person, as Robert's wife, but only as an obstacle to their paperwork. Every phone call fueled this anger. Every cold word, every dismissive tone, every repeated demand hardened my resolve. They were making my life hell. They were adding immense stress and pain to a time that was already the most painful of my life. They were trying to take away my independence, my ability to get around, the very last symbol of my husband's thoughtful provision for me. They wanted to cause me pain, to make things difficult for me? Fine, two could play at that game. I decided they weren't going to win. They weren't going to break me, I wouldn't let them. The idea came to me slowly at first, a tiny seed of defiance growing in the desolate landscape of my grief. They wanted the car back, they demanded I return it. Okay, I would return it, but I would do it on my terms, not theirs. They wanted to make my life difficult, I would give them difficult right back. Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily. I started researching online. I needed an identical car. The same make, the same model, the same year, the same color. It was important that it looked exactly like the one they wanted back. I searched dealerships across the state, then in neighboring states. Finally, I found one, listed online by a dealership about a 6-hour drive away, in a different state entirely. It was perfect. Exactly the same. This was it. This was my chance to turn the tables. My grief hadn't lessened, but this new purpose, this quiet determination, gave me a strange kind of strength. I made arrangements. I spoke to my child, explaining what I was planning. They were worried about me traveling so far alone, especially now, but they understood. They saw the fire in my eyes, the shift from brokenness to resolve. They knew I needed to do this. I packed a small bag. I got into the car they were hounding me for. The drive was long. 6 hours alone with my thoughts, the highway stretching out before me. The blue car felt solid beneath me, a contradiction to the fragile state of my heart. I thought about Robert, about our life, about how unfair this whole situation was. I thought about the credit union, picturing the people who had been so unyielding on the phone. Did they go home at night and sleep soundly? Did they ever think about the person on the other end of the line, the life they were disrupting? Probably not. They were just doing their job, following the rules. But sometimes, following the rules without a shred of human decency is the cruelest thing of all. I drove through towns and past fields, the scenery changing slowly. The sun was setting by the time I reached the town where the dealership was located. I found a small motel and checked in. I barely slept. My mind was racing with the plan, with the anticipation, with a strange mix of anxiety and exhilaration. This felt like the first active thing I had done since Robert died, something for myself, something that wasn't just reacting to the endless demands of grief and bureaucracy. The next morning, I drove to the dealership. I saw the identical car on their lot. It was waiting for me. I walked in, trying to look confident like any other customer buying a car. I spoke to a salesperson. I told them I wanted to buy the car I saw online. I had my finances in order. I was approved quickly. The process was straightforward, blessedly simple compared to the nightmare I had been living. They didn't ask for my husband, they didn't care where I worked, they just cared about the transaction. Within a few hours, the paperwork was done. I was the proud, legal owner of a brand new car, identical in every way to the one sitting outside that the credit union thought belonged to them. This new car had my name on everything. It was mine, free and clear, without the ghost of a loan tied to a deceased husband or the demands of a heartless institution. The salesperson handed me the keys to the new car. I thanked them, a genuine smile touching my lips for the first time in weeks. I stepped outside. There were two identical blue cars sitting there now. The one I had just bought, gleaming in the sunlight, and the one I had driven there, the one the credit union wanted back. Got into the new car first just to get a feel for it, to make sure everything was right. It was perfect. Then I did the next part of my plan. I took the keys out of the ignition of the new car. I walked over to the old car, the one from the credit union. I opened the door, got inside one last time. It felt strange, familiar, yet tainted by all the stress and anger it had caused. I looked around the interior, remembering the few drives Robert and I had taken in it before he passed. A wave of sadness washed over me, quickly followed by the cold, hard anger towards the credit union that had turned this symbol of his love into a source of torment. I took the keys out of the ignition of the old car. These were the keys the credit union wanted back. The keys to their car, the car they had insisted on reclaiming. I stepped out of the car. I stood there for a moment, holding the keys in my hand, looking at the two identical vehicles. One represented freedom, independence, and my own capability. The other represented grief compounded by cruelty, demands, and disrespect. Without a second thought, without hesitation, I raised my hand and threw the keys to the old car into a storm drain at the edge of the dealership parking lot. I watched them disappear down the grate, a small, insignificant clang against the concrete, but to me, it sounded like the closing of a door. A final act of defiance. They wanted their car back, fine. They could come and get it themselves. I got into my new car, locked the doors, and started the engine. I drove away from the dealership, leaving the identical blue car sitting right there in their lot. It was parked legally, not obstructing anything, just sitting there, waiting for someone from the credit union to come and claim it. The drive back to Springfield felt different, lighter. There was still grief, yes, the deep ache for Robert would always be there, but the crushing weight of the car situation, of the constant harassment, was gone. I felt empowered. I had taken control of a situation where I had felt utterly powerless. I had turned their own rules and demands against them. They wanted the car back immediately? Well, it was immediately accessible. It was parked right out in the open. All they had to do was come and get it. I arrived back home late that night, exhausted but with a sense of grim satisfaction. I went to bed, and for the first time in a long time, I slept soundly. The next morning, the phone rang. I knew who it was. The credit union, of course. They were calling about the car. Had I returned it yet? When was I bringing it back? I answered the phone, my voice calm, steady. No trace of the fear or desperation they had heard in the past week. Hello, I said. The voice on the other end was the same one, demanding and impatient. Mrs. Vance, we are calling about the vehicle. Have you returned it to our lot as instructed? I took a deep breath. This was the moment. Oh, yes, I said, my voice mild. The car you want back, it's been returned. A pause on the other end, a hint of surprise, perhaps. They probably expected more pleading, more excuses. Good. When can we expect you to bring it to our lot? Oh, I didn't bring it to your lot, I said sweetly. I took it to the dealership where I bought a new car, an identical one actually. It's sitting right there in their parking lot. You can go and pick it up whenever you like. There was a longer silence this time. I could almost hear the gears grinding in their heads. What, you? You left it at a dealership? Which dealership? It's the one 6 hours away, I said. The one where I just bought a new car. You know, because you wouldn't let me keep the old one, even though my husband paid for most of it and I needed transportation. So I got a new one, and I left the old one where I got the new one. It's right there. Go get it. The person on the other end started to sputter. But you have to return it to us, to our lot? No, I said firmly. Your demand was that the car be returned. It has been returned. It is no longer in my possession. It is sitting in a dealership parking lot. It is fully accessible. All you have to do is go get it. That sounds like your problem now, doesn't it? The voice became angry, louder. You can't do that. We demand you return it to our designated location. I felt a surge of power, of sweet, sweet satisfaction. And I demand you show some basic human decency to a grieving widow, I retorted, my voice still calm but with an iron edge. You wanted to make my life hard? Congratulations, you succeeded. Now I'm making yours hard. The car is there, go get it. We will take legal action, they threatened. We will report it stolen. It's not stolen, I said. I left it in a public place. I even told you where it is. You have the location. It's not my car anymore. You wanted it back. You got it back. Just somewhere else. I paused, letting the silence hang there. I imagined them on the other end, frustrated, confused, realizing they had pushed too far and now faced a logistical nightmare of retrieving a car hours away. They had wasted their energy harassing me, a widow, instead of figuring out a humane solution or even just sending a tow truck in the first place. Now they had to arrange the long trip, the fuel, the time, the personnel, just to get their vehicle. They had created this problem for themselves by being so inflexible and cruel. Frankly, I added, my voice dripping with finality, you can frankly go get it yourselves. I'm done dealing with you. And then I did it. The thing I had been wanting to do for days. I hung up the phone, not gently, but with a definite click. And then I went into my phone settings and blocked their number. Every single number they had called from over the past week. I wasn't going to listen to their demands or threats ever again. I had handled their problem for them in my own way, and now it was their turn to put in the effort. They wanted the car back? It was 6 hours away in a parking lot. Good luck with that. The days that followed were quiet. The phone didn't ring with their harassing calls anymore. I finally had the space and peace I needed to continue grieving for Robert. The stress about the car was gone, replaced by a quiet triumph. I knew they must have been furious. They probably had to send someone, maybe even a team, all the way down there to retrieve the vehicle. That would cost them time and money, far more than the measly $5 my husband had initially shorted on the payment, far more than it would have cost them to just let me take over the loan. It was inconvenient, it was annoying, and it was entirely their own doing. It was satisfying to know that my act of defiance had caused them the headache they had tried so hard to inflict on me during my weakest moment. I never heard directly from the credit union again after that. I assume they eventually retrieved the car. Perhaps they sent a nasty letter or two, but I would have just ignored them. As far as I was concerned, the matter was closed. I had stood up for myself. I had refused to be a victim of their heartlessness. The new car, identical to the one Robert had bought me but truly mine, became a symbol of my resilience. It allowed me to get back to some semblance of a normal life, to visit friends, run errands, and eventually, to start venturing out and rebuilding my world without Robert. It wasn't the revenge of inflicting physical harm or ruining their lives, but it was a powerful act of reclaiming my dignity and independence. It was about turning their own rigid rules and demands against them in a way that caused them significant inconvenience and expense, a direct consequence of their lack of empathy. It was about saying, you may have tried to take advantage of me in my grief, but you underestimated my strength. It was a quiet, deliberate victory. Sometimes, the most satisfying revenge isn't loud or dramatic, but simply refusing to play the victim, finding your own way to solve the problem they created, and handing the inconvenience right back to them. Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily.